you may be watching this later on. But tonight's story is Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls. Okay, and I'm not going to read all of them, but I'm just going to pick a few key stories that I think are really important. So, we have our first person who we're going to be looking at, who is this lady here. And her name is Balkisa Chaibu. And she's a very important woman. She was born in the country Niger in 1995. It says here, once there was a girl who wanted to become a doctor. Her name was Balkisa, and she was really good at school. One day, she discovered that her uncle had promised her in marriage to one of her cousins. Balkisa was horrified. "You can't force me to get married. I want to be a doctor." Unfortunately, the country where Balkisa lived allowed parents to arrange weddings for their daughters when they are still children. "Oh, just let me stay in school 5 more years, Balkisa begged to her parents. Her parents agreed to postpone the marriage, but after 5 years, Balkisa's love of learning had only grown stronger. The night before her wedding, she escaped from her house and ran to the closest police station to ask for help. She decided to challenge her uncle in court. She was terrified that this might turn her whole family against her, but her mother quietly encouraged her to keep fighting. The judge agreed with Balkisa, and when her uncle threatened her, he was forced to leave the country. "The day I won the case and I put my school uniform back on, I felt my life was renewed," she said. Today, Balkisa is at university, studying hard to become a doctor. She also campaigns for other young girls to follow her example and say no to forced marriages. She visits schools and speaks to tribal chiefs about the issue. "Study with all of your might. It's not easy, but it's your only hope," she says. So that's a lovely inspirational story about Balkisa Chaibu. Now, I've got a few other inspirational stories. This here is Sunita Alizada. And Sunita is from Afghanistan. She was born in 1996. When Sunita was 10 years old, her parents told her, "We have to sell you into marriage." Oh, it's another story like this. They started buying her nice clothes and taking more care of her than they had done before. Sunita did not know exactly what all this meant, but she knew she did not want to get married. She wanted to study, to write, and to sing songs. She told her mother so. Her mother said, "We need the money to buy a bride for your older brother. There is no choice. We must sell you." Gosh, imagine being sold. It must be an awful experience. At the last moment, the marriage arrangements fell through. War broke out in Afghanistan, where the family lived, and Sunita and her brother were sent away to live in a refugee camp in Iran. Sunita went to a school nearby and she started writing down her songs. When Sunita was 16 years old, her mum came to visit her. She told Sunita that she had to go back to Afghanistan because they had found another husband who wanted to buy her, again, getting bored. But she wanted to be a rapper. She wrote a hard-hitting song called "Brides for Sale" and uploaded it on YouTube. The video went viral and Sunita became famous. She won a scholarship to study in music in America. "In my country, a good girl should be silent," says Sunita, "but I want to share the words that are in my heart." So that's another story about a woman standing up to authority, saying she doesn't want to be sold or controlled by men. Here's someone close to our hearts, a Birmingham girl, somebody we know well, Malala Yousafzai. Now, once there was a girl who loved school. Her name was Malala. Malala lived in a peaceful valley in Pakistan. One day, a group of armed men called the Taliban took control of the valley. They frightened people with their guns. The Taliban forbade girls from going to school. Many people disagreed, but they thought it would be safer to keep their girls at home. Malala thought this was unfair and wrote about it online. She loved school very much. So one day, She said on TV, "Education is power for women. The Taliban are closing girls' schools because they don't want women to be powerful." A few days later, Malala got onto her school bus as usual. Suddenly, 2 Taliban men stopped the bus and shouted, "Which one of you is Malala?" When her friends looked at her, the men fired their guns, hitting her in the head. Malala was rushed to hospital, and she did not die. Thousands of children sent her get-well cards, and she recovered faster than anyone could have imagined. She was actually brought over here to Birmingham. "They thought bullets would silence us, but they failed," she said. "Let us pick up our books and our pens. They are our most powerful weapons. One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world." Malala is the youngest person ever to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. When the whole world is silent, even one voice becomes powerful. I think that's such a beautiful message. I had a few more that I was going to read from inside this book, Manala al-Sharif, but I think, considering the announcements yesterday that the general election is coming up, I think this is the perfect person to talk about. Her name is Kate Shepherd. Kate Shepherd is a really important woman. There was a time when men believed women were put on earth only to serve them. They thought women should cook and clean, look after the children, and not worry about anything else. Women, so they thought, should wear feminine clothes, which meant long dresses with tight-laced corsets. It didn't matter that women dressed that way could hardly move or even breathe. They just had to look pretty. Having a job for a woman used to be off limits. Playing sports, off limits. And governing the country was definitely off limits. There are still countries in the world where this is true today. Women in Britain were not even allowed to vote. But Kate thought that women should have the same freedom as men. Freedom to say what they thought, to vote for whom they wanted, and to wear comfortable clothes. One day, she stood up and declared, "Women should be allowed to vote, and they should stop wearing corsets." People were shocked, outraged, and inspired by Kate's radical new ideas. Kate and her friends gathered so many signatures on their petition that they had to paste sheets of paper together to form a long roll. They carried it into Parliament and unrolled it on the floor, like a really long carpet. Imagine 74 ice cream trucks parked in a line. It was even longer than that. It was the longest petition ever presented. The legislators were speechless. Thanks to Kate, that's the story from New Zealand actually, became the first country in the world where women will gain the right to vote. So there she is. She says, "Do not think your single vote does not matter much. The rain that refreshes the parched ground is made up of single drops." And that is such an important thing, especially coming up to the election when all your parents will be getting the opportunity to vote. Every single vote matters. Democracy is something that we have fought long and hard for. Anyway, in the future, I'll be reading some more stories from Good Night Stories from Rebel Girls, along with all sorts of other stories from all sorts of other teachers. So, sleep well. See you another time.